My next question for Ms. Power. I'm sure the insurance industry, is frustrated by the amount of claims that are being paid out, $1.2 billion, I think, last year. And surely, as an insurance industry, I'm sure you're looking at all the factors. And one thing that we've seen consistently in the news is that the people who are being apprehended stealing these vehicles are often people that it's not the first time that they've been apprehended stealing a vehicle. They might have even been to prison. They might even be on bail in some cases. Does the Insurance Bureau generally support creating tougher penalties for people who are caught stealing cars multiple times?
Thank you very much for the question. Generally, we think that all options should be on the table to be explored to help combat auto theft crisis. In addition to looking at stiffer penalties for the criminals doing this work, we're also advocating that we invest resources in prosecuting resources. We've seen that done in Ontario, and it has been helpful to making sure that these are actually working through the court system, and that will send a very significant message through those criminal organizations.
Well, and thank you for bringing up the point about funding the court system, because I think, I feel the frustration of the Canadians when they saw, I think it was just last week or 2 weeks ago, that because of court delays in this country, that people who had been waiting with charges on them were allowed to walk free under the Jordan's principle because the court wasn't able to try them within a fair amount of time. And I think Canadians are very frustrated because we're, one, not catching these people who are committing the crimes as much as we need to be, and two, when they actually are being caught, we're not even hearing their cases in a quick enough manner, and then they're just walking free. And are you frustrated by that when you see that happen?
I think the key part is to invest more into the resourcing of these prosecutions. It's important that the system works the way that it's supposed to. But again, I think that all options on the table to reduce auto theft, be that from stiffer penalties to investing more resources into prosecution, need to be explored, because unless we're looking at all of these options, this issue is not going away.
Thank you.
Yes, please, Mr. Shipley.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. My first question I'd like to ask both chiefs that are here by virtual is recently my Conservative colleague, MP Hoback, introduced Bill C-379, which would implement tougher penalties for repeat car thieves across Canada by bringing in a mandatory minimum of 3 years in jail for those who have stolen a motor vehicle 3 times. Do you think this legislation, if implemented, would assist your officers in putting and keeping repeat car thieves behind bars?
I guess I'll answer that first, if you don't mind, Nick. I can tell you from our experience here in Toronto, as well as the statistics coming out of Provincial Carjacking Task Force, almost 50% of those involved that we've apprehended are repeat offenders. And of that, about a third are young offenders. And so clearly there is an issue with, with folks being charged and arrested again and again for the same offenses. So I think that, from my opinion, that would help.
I will maybe just echo that. I do believe that consideration to legislative changes, such as how often a person's able to commit an offense, will make a difference. I do think that we need to be considerate about how we apply that, but the reality is a large percentage of our carjackings are committed by people who already have previous existing violent criminal records. And that's definitely something that identifies itself as an opportunity to begin addressing.
Thank you for that. This question, I'd go back to Deputy Chief Johnson. Deputy Chief Johnson, in your opening remarks, you mentioned a spike in auto thefts over the last few years and an epidemic in this country, some of your words. You mentioned there was 1,300 offenders. I'm not sure if it was yourself or the other chief mentioned about repeat offenders. Could you just mention what's really driving this? Why is it increasing so much? Yeah,
so that was since 2018, 1,300 offenders and over 5,000 charges. again, to your previous question and to Deputy Chief Milinovich's comments around, folks that get involved in these type of offenses are, like I've said earlier, almost 50% are repeat offenders. Sometimes specifically with car theft or carjacking, but also other violent offenses. And so, we are seeing that demographic. And as I also mentioned, about a third of that 50% are repeat young offenders.
Thank you. And you mentioned that we really need to return, your quote exactly, a return to a sense of safety in communities. Do you feel if we get some of these repeat offenders off the roads or off the streets, we would get back to a sense of safety in our communities?
Well, that's one component. Yes, there are some other strategies I think we should look at, those that have been mentioned already this afternoon.
Thank you. And Deputy Chief Milonovich, you mentioned in your opening remarks too that, and I'll quote you, you said we need tougher sanctions. Would you like to expand on what you exactly mean by tougher sanctions?
Yeah, I believe we need to consider what is available to us in terms of enforcement and the legislation. Generally speaking, you're going to find people that are charged with possession of stolen property over 5,000, theft over 5,000. These are the most common charges in auto theft, but they don't reflect the risk and the injury that it's causing to our community. So what I would advocate for, and in conversations with Crowns, we always hear there should be federal legislation very similar to the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, which takes some of those same concepts and legislates them, again, very similar to the way that we do with illegal drugs. The importation, exportation of stolen property or stolen autos, if federally legislated, would then have that jurisdiction attached to it, and it would make it easier for the police sector to pursue and investigate that and really pursue the people responsible for it, which is the organized crime element behind and that is benefiting from this issue.
Thank you to the two deputies.
I know from experience that early in your training, we learned about prevention, about the importance of crime prevention. And I haven't been on public safety as long as Mr. Gerritsen, but over the course of a number of years, I have sat on this committee. And we did a study some years back. And street checks, or what you would call in Ontario carding. We call them street checks out west. It was a big deal, and it was something that was being removed from the opportunity for police on the ground to prevent crime, to have an opportunity to determine identities of individuals who are involved in crime. We use them very effectively, and I think other agencies have as well. So you talk about the things that police agencies can do or should do to make a difference on prevention. Would something along those lines, like we talk about what tools could assist you in policing besides more money and more bodies? That's always a necessary tool. What do you think are tools that could help in the prevention of, after they've been stolen, in the justice system? We talk about all those things that can be fixed and should be fixed, legislation changes. How do we prevent them from occurring in the first place if you're just looking at it from a policing perspective and not from manufacturers or not from consumers?
Yeah, and maybe I'll jump in quickly and then Deputy Johnson can add, but prevention, absolutely. It's crucial and critical to what we do. And, I see the policing opportunity from a prevention perspective is to build awareness. Last year, the GTA services and Peel, we held the first auto summit for the GTA to discuss the issue. And then on the heels of that, really began to promote and share the story with the community. And, fast forward a little less than a year later, here we are having this conversation on a national level. So, the awareness piece is crucial. And what's that has created for us is the consumers looking at the vehicle differently. They're not just asking about comfort, about performance statistics, but they're asking about security possibilities, like what that vehicle can do to prevent itself from being stolen. The reality is it's the second largest purchase that a person is going to make in their life aside from a house. And, people are really, really aware, particularly here in the GTA, that those vehicles and those investments are at risk. So they're engaging all different types of things, and the awareness is there. And I think that's crucial. to how we prevent the cars from being stolen is through consumer
Thank you, Mr.
action.
Mott.